What is the most horrifying fact you know? That the crew of the Challenger space shuttle didn't die instantly but likely were alive and aware of everything up until the crew capsule hit the water at 207 miles per hour. A former politician said House of Cards is one of the most accurate depictions of American politics he's ever seen. There are tons of shoes near the Titanic. The reason for this is that once the ship hit the bottom of the ocean, corpses rained down around the wreckage. The fish ate the bodies but no fish at that depth in that area can eat the leather that most shoes of the time were made of. On the torture rack. More than additionally, if muscle fibers are stretched excessively, they lose their ability to contract, rendering them ineffective. More than one gruesome aspect of being stretched too far on the rack is the loud popping noises made by snapping cartilage, ligaments or bones. Every time I think of this I get freaked out. Babies in the womb can be startled and cry. However, there is no air, as their lungs and airways are filled with amniotic fluid until birth, and thus no sound. So babies are in there, silently screaming and sobbing, if they get scared. Aneurysms can have no symptoms, and can erupt at any time. If you are HIV positive, and have unprotected sex with someone else who is HIV positive, but has a different strain of HIV, you risk something called superinfection. This is when your original strain of HIV meets a different strain of HIV to form a super strain of HIV. This new strain is sometimes resistant to HIV medications. Surgery predates anesthesia. Astronomer here, most likely we live in a universe where ultimately all the galaxies will spread too far from each other to be seen. Where the stars go out, the black holes evaporate, and matter itself ultimately disintegrates. Nothing left except a giant black void with nothing in it. Not even memories, as all the energy will be exhausted. Sweet dreams. Due to their color blindness, puppies cannot see rainbows. The Cascadia subduction zone is long overdue for a rupture. When it does go, it is going to duck it up. Everything west of I-5 from far northern California to southern British Columbia is going to have a really rough time. Seismologists and geologists are laying odds on this happening within the next 50 years. This region is woefully unprepared to deal with the initial earthquake and tsunami, or their aftermath. This going to make Katrina look like a day at the park. A body decomposed in a cistern on a hotel roof for days, while the guests drank and showered in the increasingly darkening water for days. This was Elisa Lam at the Cecil Hotel in LA. This November, America's new president will be either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Japanese human experimentation during World War II. To determine the treatment of frostbite, prisoners were taken outside in freezing weather and left with exposed arms, periodically drenched with water until frozen solid. The arm was later amputated. The doctor would repeat the process on the victim's upper arm to the shoulder. After both arms were gone, the doctors moved on to the legs until only a head and torso remained. The victim was then used for plague and pathogens experiments. At any time, one of the proteins in your brain can misfold and cause a prion disease, and we don't know why. Bees are dying at an alarming rate. Toddlers and Tiaras is still a show, with a new episode scheduled for tonight. Scaphism. More than the intended victim was stripped naked and then firmly fastened within the interior space of two narrow rowing boats, or hollowed out tree trunks, joined together one on top of the other with the head, hands and feet protruding. The condemned was forced to ingest milk and honey, and more honey would be poured on him to attract insects, with special attention devoted to the eyes, ears, mouth, face, genitals, and anus. In some cases, the executioner would mix milk and honey and pour that mixture all over the victim. He would then be left to float on a stagnant pond or be exposed to the sun. The defenseless individual's feces accumulated within the container, attracting more insects which would eat and breed within the victim's exposed flesh, which also, pursuant to interruption of the blood supply by burrowing insects, became increasingly gangrenous. The individual would lie naked, covered from head to toe in milk, honey, and his own feces. The feeding would be repeated each day, in some cases to prolong the torture, so that fatal dehydration or starvation did not occur. Death. when it eventually occurred, was probably due to a combination of dehydration, starvation, and septic shock. Delirium would typically set in after a few days. Edit. To all the people saying it's a myth. Holy hell, I hope it damn well is. This it is mad duck UO. 1 in 50 of us is walking around with a brain aneurysm. It just hasn't ruptured. An ancient warrior and devastating general in the 14th century, Timur, or Tamerlane, died at the age of 68, and inscribed on his tomb were the words, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble, and whoever disturbs my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." Joseph Stalin ordered the tomb to be opened on the 20th of June, 1941, and exactly 2 days later, on the 22nd of June, 1941, Adolf Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa and begins to invade the Soviet Union. This legend is called Tamerlane's curse. Chimpanzee DEs have spikes. That if you hit someone with your car in China and just injure them, you probably will pay their hospital bills for years. If you kill the person, you will pay an agreed amount of money to the family. So you are better off killing the person. I have seen footage of someone repeatedly backing over a young girl to make sure they are dead. Brutal. Russia is doing a drill involving 40 million people in preparation of nuclear war as we speak. We can be obliterated instantaneously from something in space that we couldn't possibly see coming. Most types of cancer rarely develops by pure chance. Usually there is a specific event or time frame of exposure that resulted in the development of cancer in that body, but we can't really find out when or where, so instead we go by saying bad luck. The bystander effect. The probability of a person in need getting help is inversely proportional to the number of people in the vicinity. An example of this is a car accident. The more people there are around, the less likely it is that the victim will receive help. This is because each individual assumes someone else will do it. This is in contrary to what we'd think would happen. Koalas bears can give you chlamydia. Hold on before you get any wrong ideas here. They pass it by peeing on you. So if you get close to one of those cuddly bastards, it could end up very badly for you. So do not even think about touching those fur balls. I have no idea what's written in any of the terms and conditions I've agreed to. Apple may very well have the rights to my firstborn son. That we are being constantly bombarded with stellar radiation and the only things protecting us is our dying atmosphere and a magnetopause. Space travel is deadlier the farther we go. Edit. Grammar for the grammar Nazis and information checks. If you get priapism, an erection that lasts longer than 4 hours and won't go away, the treatments are gruesome. Basically, if the blood in your D stays in there too long and can't get out, it becomes ischemic and starts to clot, which makes the problem even worse. It can't drain back out of the D back into the bloodstream. The treatment? Jabbing a big needle in your D and draining the blood. They can detonate with anesthetic first, but that's just another needle that needs to go in first. The draining needs to be done multiple times, and if the blood is too thick for the needle to drain, or if the issue continues, the procedure is to then take a scalpel, shove it into the head of the D, ream it 90 and let the blood rush out. Here's a urologist roughly demonstrating the procedure, not on a person. Thankfully. TLDR. The 4-hour warning on Viagra is serious business. And don't get bitten by a Brazilian wandering spider. Victor Marchetti, Special Assistant to the Director of Central Intelligence. More than a lot of money was spent. They slit the cat open, put batteries in him, wired him up. The tail was used as an antenna. They made a monstrosity. They tested him and tested him. They found he would walk off the job when he got hungry. So they put another wire in to override that. Finally they're ready. They took it out to a park and pointed it at a park bench and said, "Listen to those two guises." They put him out of the van. And a taxi comes and runs him over. There they were, sitting in the van with all those dials. And the cat was dead. Ducks become cannibals due to boredom. Of all ducking reasons, they can only be stopped by cutting off their mouths. Edit. Bill. Every 60 seconds in Africa, a minute passes. Yellowstone Park is sitting on top of a supervolcano that is just about due to erupt and bring about the apocalypse. If you want a good book on the horrifying reality of how we could all die at any second, read Everything is Going to Kill Everyone. Best one was how there was almost a modified bacteria that was designed to kill weeds released, but it was stopped at the last second because one group of scientists decided to test it in actual soil instead of sterile soil and found it spread so fast and was so effective. It would have destroyed most plant life on Earth within a very short amount of time. Basically destroying our food source and letting everyone starve to death. There really is quite a lot of it here in Australia that will kill me. The majority of malaria deaths are children under the age of 5 and pregnant women. In 2015 there were an estimated 438,000 malaria-related deaths. With the US presidential election upcoming, it's pretty terrifying how uninformed we are as an electorate where a recent survey indicated more than 40% can't name the vice presidential candidates. There are more jugglers in the world than polar bears : according to the writings of Valerius Maximus and Florus, the king of the Teutones, Teutoburg, was taken in irons after the Teutones were defeated by the Romans. Under the conditions of the surrender, 300 married women were to be handed over as Roman slaves. When the matrons of the Teutones heard of this stipulation, they begged the consul that they might instead be allowed to minister in the temples of Ceres and Venus. When their request was denied, the Teutonic women slew their own children. The next morning, all the women were found dead in each other's arms, having strangled each other during the night. This act passed into Roman legends of Teutonic fury. Source: the richest 62 people in the world have more money combined than the poorest half of the world's population combined. People are actually being named Bradley. After the atomic bomb was dropped, there were some people who were close enough to have their faces melted but not killed. So for a few days before they died of dehydration, they wandered around moaning with their mouths melted shut. Oh cool, this is my highest voted comment yet. We are only aware of the serial killers who slipped up and made mistakes.